be patient in the grieving process. And for those of you that might be the support people around them, all those little things that people do and that did for me were incredibly helpful were things like creating a meal train because the person who's grieving is exhausted and it
Right.
really takes a lot to think about the next meal. And so, kind of taking things off their plate, like you said, ask, it's okay to ask, but be specific because often people will say, what can I do? I'm here to help. But when you're grieving, you just don't have the mental capacity to even go to that checklist because you're grieving. But then you also have kind of what a friend of mine and fellow author, I think, calls the chores of death, which is we have to meet with attorneys. We're talking about all these different things in terms of finances. So often the person who's grieving is really overwhelmed. And even though they know you're well meaning, it's like it helps to be specific.
Welcome to the award-winning Authors Show, where we guide professionals in crafting a lasting legacy through the art of self-publishing. We help you remove self-doubt from your mind with our proven process to become a published author. We have helped authors all over the world to publish their books since 2002. I'm your host, Lisa Umina, CEO of Halo Publishing International. If you're ready to become an award-winning author, let's get started. I'm so excited to start this amazing interview with an author that's become my friend. I think she's guiding my spirit and soul at this point. Such an inspiration for so many people, and we'll get to learn more about her journey and what inspired her to write her book. Today, I have Gina Kitzmiller on our award-winning author show, and we're just going to spend some intimate time together. Gina, thank you for being a part of our show today.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm really excited to be here.
Let's ask the question everyone wants to know. So, what inspired you to write your book?
Well, several years ago, I found myself in a chapter that I didn't ask to be in. I had married the love of my life, who I met at 15. We had two children, and I expected fully that this was the happily ever after for my life, as a lot of us do. So on my wedding day, I just thought, this is perfect. This is exactly how my life is going to be. And unexpectedly, things changed with his alcoholism. We eventually separated, and then he died by suicide in 2018. And I was left parenting two young children on my own and wondering what happened to my happily ever after story for my life. So I wrote the book Soul Walk in hopes to kind of share behind the scenes my path and how intuition and connection to spirit really shaped the healing around his passing and around owning my voice and my own truth. And I hope it helps others in the future.
So, one of the things that, well, many, right, Gina, that has inspired me is that you've had to walk that journey and it wasn't a choice that you wanted to make, but you had to, like you said, to keep going for yourself and for your children. Now, here comes another big part in you is, we say what comes first, stage to page, page to stage, but yet you built a business around this and you help others you guide your clients to connect with their inner knowing and with loved ones and spirit. So talk to us about that.
It's one of the things that I really love to do. There's something really rewarding about helping people to own their own inner knowing. And I found as an intuitive, when I would meet with clients or students, oftentimes they have their own little miracles or synchronicities or that own inner knowing, but we don't really give ourselves permission to own that as a truth. And so when I tell someone, gosh, like that is actually a sign that you saw from your loved one, or you are deeply intuitive, you can see how it gives people permission to own what they already knew simply by getting that validation. So my goal is to help people not just rely on intuitives, but to rely on their own inner knowing that they're connected with their loved ones in spirit, and to allow that relationship to develop the way that they would like it to look in their own life.
And then now that you have your book, do you find that it's going to be, or you are using it currently as an instrument to these connections with your clients? Meaning, like, do you have retreats? What does it look like if I go to your website and I want to just have more of Gina, more of Gina's message? How does that look for me?
I do a lot of different things. So I do offer Soul Rise retreats. I host events and I see clients one-on-one. For me, the book kind of came out of a need as well because clients would ask, a little bit about my backstory, or they would share something about grief. And I would explain that, like, I understand, I've been through it. I could relate to a lot of the themes that people have, which is not just the loss of a loved one, but the loss of a chapter that they, were really wanting in their life, or they find themselves divorced or separated and they didn't foresee that coming and they're struggling to come up with what's the next chapter for myself. And so I would share a little bit. And then I really wanted in this book to be very honest and frank about my own struggle so that when someone else has a difficult time, they can say, oh gosh, like I can relate to that. And she got through it. And this is how she moved through it. And hopefully it will provide a little bit of hope and inspiration for them.
I think too, as an author, right? We want to put out something that we can't find. And I've always felt in 23 years that, and I'm doing this as a publisher, right? That there's got to be those tools, right? So if I'm grieving, I want to learn more from someone who understands and has walked this journey and can hold my hand to the process. And so I think one of the hardest things to do, and you did it, so kudos to you for that, because when you think about having to write your memoir and leaving this impact, and I think that was a whole spiritual journey in itself where tears are on the pages, right? When we're opening ourselves and being so vulnerable. But how did that impact your own healing when you had to do that process? What did that look like for you?
I think it helped me along the way. I absolutely agree. In grief, I went to look for those resources. I wanted to read other stories, and there really wasn't very much out there. And there certainly was nothing about parenting children or parenting children through suicide grief. And that was one of the reasons why I felt really strongly that my story needed to be told for people who were in more traumatic loss and finding themselves unexpectedly, parenting young children. So what happened was as I began to write, of course, we have that fear of like, well, I can't share this. It's too personal, or you
Mm-hmm.
think, people aren't going to care. But I just trusted of, I'm just here to tell my story. And I hope that it'll resonate with who it is meant to resonate with. And I hope that someone will pick it up and to read it. And heaven forbid, if they find themselves down the road or a friend of theirs is in the same or similar circumstance, they can say, hey, I read this book a few years ago and it might be helpful for you. And then that person can find it.
I think too, I don't know if it's in every city, every town, right? But there are these grieving centers now. I know there's one in where I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. But even just those partnerships to know that you're giving a voice to those types of organizations, right? Just or for someone who can't write it or put it together and you're giving them hope. And hope to me is the biggest thing through losing someone, not to mention how you've lost someone. And so the thing that I'm going to ask you, and it kind of you mentioned is like, you have children and I don't know. I haven't done the research, but maybe you have it. I'm going to ask you what's next. But in that same sentence, I also want to say, are there books out there for teenagers that deal with grief? Because it's not a time period, it's for the rest of our life. And it comes in volumes in one day and others, from wedding days to graduations that there's the chair that's empty, right? And it hits home so much. And I know you as a mom try to overcompensate that, right? So you sit in both chairs so they don't see that someone's missing because you're doing an amazing job being both. But what is next for you? I don't want to say in the publishing world, but just in general, what do you see happening?
Well, I hope to begin to partnership with some of the local resources, particularly here in Columbus, Ohio. We're lucky we have quite a few. One is called Loss that deals specifically with loss by suicide. And to really start to have speaking engagements to connect with readers and to hopefully help kind of provide a little bit of a light in this area. But you're absolutely right. There's very few books that I know of for teens, for children. And I know that for myself and my kids, that those kind of waves of grief come up unexpectedly. It's like my son turned 16 and like, gosh, that was like a really hard like month for both of us because I wanted his dad here. And I felt like he should have been the one helping him learn to drive. And I could tell for my son, that was a hard chapter for him.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I feel like there's few resources. I think it's getting better. But there's still a real long way to go to really provide the support that people need in the grieving process. process, which is so many of us because we have different types of loss. And that's just kind of the inevitable of life, right? We lose those that we love.
But, it just reminded me of something I saw in social media when someone asked their friend to come out to meet for lunch, but she was grieving her husband. She goes, "No, but keep asking because one day I will." Oh, that was like that hit. So, in that, let's take this to something to conclude our interview, but even more so, if you were to give advice to others other than trying to do it on your own, because that message is clear with Gina. Just don't do it on your own. You have so many resources, so many places that you can connect to and reach out to, including Gina. But what kind of message do you want to leave our listeners?
I would say to be patient in the grieving process. And for those of you that might be the support people around them, sometimes it's not even those in like the closest inner circle. It's sometimes acquaintances or coworkers that really have kind of the emotional ability to lean in and to offer support. So all those little things that people do and that did for me were incredibly helpful were things like creating a meal train because the person who's grieving is exhausted and it
Right.
really takes a lot to think about the next meal. And so, kind of taking things off their plate, like you said, ask, it's okay to ask, but be specific because often people will say, "What can I do? I'm here to help." But when you're grieving, you just don't have the mental capacity to even go to that checklist because you're grieving. But then you also have kind of what a friend of mine, and fellow author, I think, calls the chores of death, which is we have to meet with attorneys. We're talking about all these different things in terms of finances. So often the person who's grieving is really overwhelmed. And even though they know you're well meaning, it's like it helps to be specific. I'm at Starbucks. Can I bring you a coffee? I was
Love
at the
it.
grocery store. What can I bring you? So doing those things that may seem very small, like mowing someone's yard, is actually really, really helpful because it helps when we're really struggling in those those first weeks of, I really need assistance, but I don't know how to even ask for it.
And that's just it. They don't know how to ask because they don't know what they need because there's so much that they need, but they don't want to feel like they're putting you out. And it's so easy. Like you said, I love that to say, I'm going to stop over for Starbucks. Just even that, because they'll have someone to share some time with the coffee. I love that. It's very keeping it simple is so important. Let's tell our listeners where they can find your work. Obviously, you have your website. Let's talk about the website and obviously Amazon for the book and hardcover paperback, an ebook, Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, Books a Million. But let's talk about your business and how someone, if they would need you to help them, how can they get a hold of you?
So my website is the Karuna and it's Karuna life, life.com. You can also find me on Instagram at the Karuna Life. And as you said, they can find the book on Amazon is probably the easiest. If you put in Soul Walk Gina Kitzmiller, it should pop up. And then I will be listing all the events and things that I will be kind of doing in the future on my website. So that's probably the easiest and best way to find out about upcoming retreats and events and speaking engagements.
Good. Well, thank you so much. That's a lot. That's a lot. And I love it. I love it because I think we're all grieving in some way or another in different shapes and forms and different parts of our life. I just put together a book about leaving a country and coming to another one, and you kind of grieve leaving your old country to come to the new one. So I think your book has a message for everyone. And I obviously know when working with you, they'll be able to heal because they know how to heal. And it's not so much that it'll be faster, it'll just be easier, right? And I think that's the message today is just to get through this in an easier way, to find our own way, right? And to get back into life and find our journey and making it, impactful, making it rememberable, and to know that we got to keep going because we only have one life as we know it. So thank you so much, Gina, for spending this time with me. It's been amazing. And I look forward to doing many more things with you in the near future.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're ready to publish your book, please submit your manuscript on halopublishing.com, or you can download our free publishing guide to learn everything you need to know about the entire self-publishing process. Start writing your legacy today.